On today's episode of the Unofficial Shopify podcast, we discuss an alleged $75 million fraud. Okay, so 2 weeks ago, I mentioned on the show as a top of the show housekeeping note, I said, look, it's January. A lot of people are jumping into a new business, scaling up a business, are just generally looking to invest in themselves and their own business. This also means there are a lot of con artists that come out around this time willing to sell you the roadmap and a get-rich-quick plan, right? And last January, there was a phenomenal deep dive article into like guru culture around e-commerce and Amazon and those experiences that we discussed on the show.
It was literally like a year ago. There was an article in The Atlantic, and like 1 year ago today, that was the episode that we dropped. Was talking about that.
Today, purely coincidentally...
Little did we know 2 weeks ago, when we mentioned it again in the morning, someone was being arrested.
Oh, really? Were they arrested?
Well, I don't know.
No, it says
arrested?
assets were frozen.
All right, fine. He's not in jail.
Okay. So, there is...
We almost were involved in a Ponzi scheme. An alleged Ponzi scheme.
Yeah, let's make it clear. No one's been convicted here.
Essentially, every verb we use in this podcast, put the word allegedly in front of it.
Yes.
Because we don't want to get sued.
Last spring, so I believe it was like May, I could look it up, but it was in the spring.
It was like April or May, yeah.
Yeah, of 2019. Someone reached out to me. I believe they were a podcast listener and said, hey, you listen to your show, and I've got some friends who are involved in e-commerce, and do you want to go get lunch with us? It'll be fun. I said, sure, why not? I'll go get lunch. And it was at Gibson's.
It was at Gibson's downtown, which is, if you're not in Chicago, that's like very fancy, nice, high-end steakhouse downtown.
And not just downtown, at Gold Coast, which of the downtown area in Chicago, Gold Coast is like premium.
Yeah.
Gold Coast has a Bentley dealership. And so, I mean, the folks I met with were Ken and Carrie Courtwright, who are from, their company is Today's Growth Consultants, and at the time they were known for running the Income Store.
Which I gotta say, calling your business the Income Store is the biggest fucking con job name I've ever heard in my life.
Well, so the Income...
Get Rich Quick Inc.
Yeah. So the Income Store is was a investment vehicle. You, as an Income Store client, invested $100,000 minimum, I think was what they said. And
I'll run down what the business was.
Oh, you got, all right.
All right, I got all the stuff. I'll run down what the business was, and then Kurt could give us his man-on-the-ground perspective from his lunch with these folks.
Okay, hit me.
All right, so the Income Store, what it was is, years ago, it was a network of blogs that was essentially doing Google AdSense, that was running AdSense on the blogs. They had various affiliate links and that sort of stuff, and that was how these blogs generated money. And what you would do is, you would give Ken and Carrie Courtwright, or the Income Store, $100,000, and they would buy a blog for you. And then they would manage the blog and do all the work, and then they would keep half the revenue as like a management fee, and then they would send the other half of the revenue to you, and through this, you would just generate passive income that would wildly outperform the $100,000 you gave them. And as part of this, they had guarantees, and they personally guaranteed that you would get 15% return annually on your investment.
This is the first red flag.
This is the first red flag. Guaranteed returns. If anyone promises you guaranteed returns, they are taking your money. They're Bernie Mad off. That is a scheme. Do not listen.
Yeah, so number one, remind yourself, all investments carry inherent risk. So anyone who makes a guarantee on an investment, unless it's like a savings account doing 1%.
Unless it's literally T-bills that is like U.S. Treasury bonds, and even those are not guaranteed because the government of the United States could collapse. Like, those aren't guaranteed. But, so they promised you 15% a year, and they would send you, that's $15,000 a year, they would send you a check for $1,250 every month. And obviously, if the site performed higher than $1,250 every month, you would get a check for higher than that. And according to their claims, you actually were the owner of that website. So if you wanted to cancel the deal or do whatever at any time, you could keep your website and walk away from their management. So obviously, these sites, and I looked at some of them, they were really shady. They were like weird review sites, weird like health-focused sites. And I'm guessing they used a lot of black hat, gray hat SEO stuff to boost them up in the Google search rankings.
Well, not necessarily. So, that's pure speculation.
That's pure speculation.
We know they hired a team of copywriters to create content.
So that's what they're doing,
blogs.
yes. And they hired copywriters, obviously paying bargain basement internet copywriter needs a job prices. And so let's think about this step that has happened. You have just given them $100,000, and all they are required to do is write you a check for $1,200 every month.
Okay.
So where does the other $98,000 go?
That money was used ostensibly to purchase the website that you have invested in.
Which you would hope. So if you're purchasing, let's talk about this. If you're purchasing a website for $100,000, you would probably expect that website to generate, say, $30,000 annually. Like that's like
It's conservative.
It's conservative. I mean, this site is producing probably between $30,000 to $50,000. And then they declared that they were such gurus at SEO and monetization that, well, don't worry that the website we bought doesn't generate that much money now. We're so good at management, we're going to supercharge this site's revenue, and it's going to be worth well over $100,000 when we're done with it.
And they had like a history of managing internet or growing internet businesses prior to the income store?
I don't know what they did before this. I know they declared bankruptcy in 1999. So
I think a lot of people did, though.
Not in 1999. Things were going good then.
Oh.
So that's what they pretty much were doing. And here's a letter that they sent in 2017 to their investors. To start, as many of you know, from 2012 to 2016, we battled Google algorithms and were in a constant dance of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And in addition, as many have received, if we failed on a site, we'd always replace it with another. In 2016, we made a hard charge at Facebook-driven assets as they were providing us traffic and revenue, the likes of which have never been seen before. So what they were doing is they were counting on gaming Google to make the money. And then anytime the Google algorithm changed for their like kind of trash content blog network, they then switched to, they would just crater whenever Google changed anything. And then they moved on to Facebook in 2017.
Okay.
And
so how long had this been going on?
I mean, this has been going on for at least since 2012.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
And so the same thing happened. Facebook then changed then their reasons for, the reason that these sites aren't generating things, well, it was people aren't getting the returns they expected. Oh, well, it's because Google keeps changing the algorithm. So we got to somehow
But it was a
Google.
guaranteed payout.
But it was only a guaranteed payout of a tiny amount of money. And these people have access to the back end and see the revenue that's being generated. And the revenue that's being generated is not commiserate at all with the $100,000 that they gave these people.
Okay.
So, and it's always, again, as with these Ponzi schemes, it's always a case of just like, you got to stay 1 step ahead of the people with another new excuse. So, it's because Google's screwing us. And then it became, okay, well, Facebook's screwing us, including this line. I don't even know what they said. This is, again, from like their message to their investors. A year or so ago, we had an immediate 7-figure monthly loss when the government mandated Facebook to turn off their paywalls due to selling everyone's data through the paywalls. I don't even know what that means.
It sounds like word salad.
It's just
I don't know what they're
gobbledygook.
talking about there.
So
July,
then,
when was that?
That was 2017. So, I mean, I think part of the whole stuff with the, it might be something involving the election guys in the UK that were helping out the Trump campaign. And then that caused, they were doing a bunch of shady, terrible stuff that was against the Facebook toss. And then like, there were a lot of Facebook alterations, but it wasn't like government mandated.
You know, Googling it, all I could find, so like literally, if I Google government Facebook paywall, it's all stuff about the $5 billion fine for the FTC for 2019.
Yeah.
So I added 2017 on there into my search, and I really can't find anything what they're talking about. Facebook tested, it sounds like Facebook tested paywalls and subscriptions for a thing called instant articles. I don't know. That one doesn't ring true. We'll move on.
Whatever. So Facebook, then the government made Facebook screw them. And then, so now we're pivoting yet again. The only platform offering no algorithms, no paywalls is that of e-commerce, with the leading platform being Shopify. As I shared in our Christmas State of the Union last year, our first 22 Shopify stores launched the first week of January. I showed that they went from $21,000 a week to $100,000 a week in the final week of March. This new growth model showed growth opportunities 15% better than our Facebook-driven assets. We proceeded to build and buy what is now 422 Shopify stores. So they pivoted directly into Shopify. And let's note one thing with that number. Their entire portfolio of 22 stores did $100,000 a week. That's one investor. How many investors do they have at this point, and their entire network of stuff is still only throwing off $100,000 a week? So it's like, where did all the money go? Anyway, they pivoted into Shopify, and then all throughout this letter, there's just more garbage about they hired this guy, and now they're involved in artificial intelligence-driven hubs to cross-reference store inventories. Like, it's just all gobbledygook.
Buzzwords?
Yeah, buzzwords. And so they moved big into Shopify. They had this giant portfolio of over 400 Shopify stores that they were going to supercharge the revenue. And this is where Ether Cycle comes in.
So I get to go out to lunch with these folks, and I'd never heard of any of this. And this was spring 2019, and they explained to me that they had, like, it wasn't clear to me that it was investor money. Maybe I missed it. Maybe they glossed over it. But they said, hey, we've got a portfolio of not dozens, but hundreds of Shopify stores. We're actively buying more and more Shopify stores, and we need help scaling them. Tell us what you think. So I was like blown away by initially just like
you were shocked by the sizing, because they were just like, oh yeah, we own 400 Shopify stores.
Yeah,
NBD.
The sheer scale of this thing, like managing one store. Anyone who has done this knows scaling one store is just blood, sweat, and tears. Scaling 10 stores, oh my gosh, you're a serial entrepreneur, you're superhuman. How do you manage hundreds?
You have employees. They had employees.
So they did.
People
they
worked
had
at this company.
20 employees, I think I saw somewhere. And so we, talked through like, yeah, here's how you would, here's some ideas, just throwing stuff against the wall. And I flat out was like, this is the most utter, like, it would take phenomenal hubris for me to be able to try and attempt this. Like, I wouldn't even try it.
It smelled funny to you from the beginning.
Yeah, it did. It just because I know the amount of work that goes in, and I'm just thinking about like customer support and creating content, and it seemed like it seemed like an impossible task. I really didn't think that this could be done. But we talked through like, oh, here's some ideas. And then they followed up with me and said, hey, would you jump on the phone with with a couple of the guys who are staff there?
It's Pittsburgh. Apparently they had a bunch of development teams in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I said it was Pennsylvania.
Yeah. I thought I remember you from the phone calls. Anyway, they were located in Chicago. They lived in Manuka, which is like a far southwest suburb. Ken has a giant 4,000 square foot house in Manuka. I wonder how he paid for that.
Allegedly. Well, actually, so we know in these articles and the SEC filing, he had a $2,800 a month mortgage, and the company was paying the mortgage, but the company wasn't just paying the monthly payment on the mortgage; it was paying $3,000 a week on a $2,800 a month mortgage. So that one really speaks to this was not ever meant to be a legit effort.
All right, but that's forward ahead. That's after they get busted. We're still in the period where we're smelling these guys out.
Yeah. So then I got a call with their guys, and at this point I was like, how do you even manage this? I'm like, just tell me how you do it and like what your struggles are. And the answer was it was just unending spreadsheets to try and figure out.
It was literally spreadsheets. Like there was no system that was just like a spreadsheet with 400 tabs.
Yes. Yes. And that was how you had the high level overview of the thing, and like where it was like what developments, what state each was in, what stats about it. It didn't seem terribly useful, and I basically said, I was like, wow, you've got your work cut out for you. You have a good day. And then we never communicated again after that.
Well, and I think the workers there probably thought they were working at, it's a big, I guess you could conceive of like a giant company that's a venture capital company with like millions of dollars coming in, which is what this was, buying that many stores. And they're like, okay, I can see this. Like they just have a ton of stores and they're all just going to put all the money in one big pot. So like if you're in the beast, I guess you can kind of see how it might be working.
So after that was over the summer.
But wait, so we kind of knew a guy that worked there. One of my old coworkers worked there.
Yeah.
And you called him up and asked him point blank. You said,
he was the one that I talked to.
Yeah. And so
I flat out
it was a
asked
guy
him.
I knew. I used to work with him. He's a good guy. He's a legit person. And you straight up asked him.
At this point, I asked him semi-jokingly. I said, hey, on a scale of legit to scam, where does this fall? And he goes, probably more toward legit. And I don't know if he was like joking around with me or he himself was not 100% confident.
Yeah, he couldn't say this is a legitimate business. He was probably not a scam.
Yeah, that was how he phrased it. Was probably not a scam. Poor guy.
Yeah, he lost his job. We shouldn't laugh.
Yeah. So last Wednesday night, an article breaks.
Yeah. That gets, I even forget how I saw it. I think like someone else I knew tweeted it out, and it was because it was like, look at this random ass Ponzi scheme from Manuka. Whoever heard of them? And I immediately texted the link to Kurt and was like, isn't this that guy you had lunch with?
Yeah.
And he was like, yes.
Read us a quote from the Sun-Times article about what happened and when did this happen? January 1st?
Well, the SEC actually busted him and shut the company down in December.
December 30th.
But
is what this says.
All the stuff didn't really break. So, and the other thing is, let's just talk about how deep this goes. This is a real company with a real website. They're on the Inc. 500 list of like these like fastest growing companies.
You could find plenty of articles quoting them, articles about them.
Yeah, and I kind of want to be like, hey,
if you're an Entrepreneur on Fire fan, that podcast with John Lee Dumas, you have heard this man Kenneth Courtwright on that show.
Yeah,
that episode has since been deleted. I don't blame him. And I'd do the same thing.
And I'm like, what kind of due diligence is Inc. doing? Like, do they really have that much revenue? Like, who even knows?
Well, like those Inc. and Fortune 500 lists. The way they work, it's like you can either send them your tax filings or you can have a CPA like send them your financial info and it has to be notarized. So you have to really go out of your way to lie to them when you apply.
Well, if this company was employing a CPA, I would say that CPA is allegedly not on the up and up. Allegedly.
All right, so give me the quote from this Sun-Times article.
Oh, I don't know. A federal judge has frozen the assets of an Illinois man and the company he ran under the name The Income Store after the Securities and Exchange Commission accused him of a Ponzi-like scheme that raised $75 million. Not
only has the business run by Kenneth D. Courtwright III of Manuka allegedly become, quote, unstable, the SEC said money for the business was used to overpay on his mortgage and make private school tuition payments. And so the SEC moved to freeze the assets of Courtwright and the business last month in December out of fear that the alleged scheme would continue until the business collapses. So they've got a 22-page complaint about it. The reality is that the business model's not been successful, said according to the SEC lawyer. It's not in satisfactory financial condition. It's unable to perform its duties. It's crumbling under its debt obligation.
So here we go. Courtwright and his business raised at least $75 million from more than 500 investors since January of 2017. And 2017 is only a more recent tranche because we saw in the earlier messages he's sending out that he'd been doing it since 2012. They did so by striking deals in which the business offered a minimum guaranteed rate of return on revenue generated by websites the business built or acquired for the investors. However, the websites wound up generating just $9 million in advertising and sales between 2017 and 2019. In the same time, Courtright's business paid $30 million to its investors.
Oh.
In what the SEC described as classic Ponzi fashion, the business funded the gap between revenues and investor payouts by striking more deals with investors. So here's what happened. They bought these underperforming websites. They owe everyone their $1,200
guaranteed payment.
Their $1,200 a month check. And notice you gave them $500,000, you're getting five $1,200 a month checks, and they need to find that money somewhere because the websites aren't making the money. So they just bring in new investors to pay out the old investors. But think about this though. So they owe you $15,000 a year. So say they think about, all right, we got to pay him for 2 years. That's $30,000. Where did the other $70,000 go of the $100,000 you paid them?
Well, according to this, it was used on tuition and mortgage payments.
Yeah, it allegedly went into Kenneth Courtright's pocket and his wife too, because his wife was an employee of the business.
Yes.
She was also a member of the Grundy County Board, which is my favorite Illinois county name.
Yeah, I feel like
Grundy.
If you're a Married with Children fan, like there are a lot of Chicago jokes in there. I'm sure there's Grundy County jokes buried in that show.
But yeah, so she's like this, and here's one of my favorite things. So the canary went off in the coal mine in the fall of 2019 when they started to stiff all their vendors. They outsourced a lot of their content generation and their work to independent contractors, of whom we were potentially going to be one of them, but we decided they were too shady. And we demand payment up front, which obviously any Ponzi scheme is not going to want to do because they can't run out on you later. But so they started stiffing their vendors. Here's something from earlier in December, just a month ago. I'm a contractor for the income store, and they stopped paying us 4 weeks ago. We are owed tens of thousands of dollars. We've asked for our pay, and we've been met with awful attitudes from the executives and the owners. Carrie Courtright was particularly nasty. She threatened to sue one of us for slander and stalking. A real nice lady.
Where'd you find that?
That was posted on a forum where people were discussing this. Investors who had been burned by these guys were talking on a forum. And then I found a GoFundMe also started by people who used to work for them. And I'm assuming that's where the slander came from because they talk a bunch of shit about the income store on the GoFundMe. And they're talking about Carrie Courtright again. But she ends all correspondence I have seen with, quote, blessings. So at least we know she's a good Christian. Maybe God will step in and make payroll for her.
Oh, God.
So there's an elected member of Grundy County who is also involved in this sham. But yeah, so they took the money out of the business. Since January 2017, the business allegedly moved more than $1.5 million directly into the Courtright's personal bank accounts. And then he took out $12,000 a month to pay his $3,000 mortgage. And
well, you don't want to get that mortgage interest is very expensive.
Well, I mean, yeah. Here's a little tip, folks. If you are paying off a mortgage, if something you could do is if you can make 13 mortgage payments a year instead of the 12 monthly ones, that really adds up on the back end of the mortgage because you're saving on the thing. So it's like
this is just smart money.
This is actually smart money, man. I'm not kidding here when I say this. If you make the 13th payment every year, that's like a real force multiplier at the back end. It may seem like one extra month now, but it ends up being a bunch of extra months.
It's dramatic.
It's a dramatic
at the
thing.
end because of the interest.
So he just took that, and instead of making one extra payment
per
he
year,
was making quadruple payments.
Yes,
just make that's another thing I think people don't think about when they're trying to think of money saving tactics. Make quadruple payments on your mortgage. You want to pay 4 times as much your mortgage every month. Also, they allegedly paid more than $12,000 in 2018 and $24,000 in 2019 to a private secondary school attended by members of their family. So they're paying school tuitions too. So anyway, there was a dude. He was in Chicago. He was running a giant Ponzi scheme, allegedly. And we had lunch with him. And he tried to hire us, and we thought he was a scam artist.
At the time, I was like, this is either... There's a non-zero chance this is a scam, but certainly this is just too big to work.
At the very least, it's a terrible business model because it's just one random dude in Manuka who owns 400 Shopify stores and is like, make them all good.
What I love here is 5 months ago on Reddit, someone posted in the investing subreddit Income Store. Looking for some feedback on an investment I made about 4 years ago with a company called Income Store. They buy and run websites for investors and split the profits. They guarantee a minimum of 15% returns for life. And you own the website. My problem is that the website they bought for me is now worthless. I invested over $100,000 and have zero equity. They claim that all of the sites they've purchased are working out financially on their website, but this is clearly false. Anyone else have any experience with this group headed by Ken Courtright? I'm getting nervous. Ponzi scheme? Question mark? And first comment is exactly what you said. Anytime you see the words guaranteed returns, that should have automatically flagged it as a scam. That, yes, this sounds like a fraud. Absolutely sketchy. You invested $100K in this? Sounds like it just keeps going like that. And then the guy gets defensive. Update. Lots of naysayers out there, which is what I expect from those who don't have any experience or knowledge with this investment. So, sir, you already told us you invested $100,000 and have $0. Like, what? But I understand where that would be disturbing, and you would get defensive.
And I think another thing that might have triggered it is last December. So by October, November, of 2019, they started stiffing their contractors, and then on December 13th, just a month ago, they stopped paying out the guaranteed payments. So clearly the scheme had slowed down by that point that they didn't even have the guaranteed payment money. And if I wanted to make a guess, I would guess that that was the final trigger that someone dropped a dime on them.
Yeah, that's what is not clear here.
People stopped getting their guaranteed checks.
Is what triggered the SEC to get involved and stop this. Because it did, they ran this for years. This was not like
it's going for
a flash in the pan thing.
According to their own declarations, this has gone for 7 years. And I think we were debating whether or not it's like, because,
did this start at the start, was this legitimate? And then you couldn't make the payment. And so, all right, well, we'll just move some money. And then the wheels fall off at that point where it's like, it started off as, I just have a big vision and I could do this. And how could we lose? I'm so confident. And then the wheels fall off. And then they're just trying to keep it going until we can figure it out, kind of thing.
I know, I'm like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels not that far from sort of the venture capital business plan of we're going to drop in a bunch of dough, we're going to lose a bunch of money the first few years, but then we're going to get huge and we're going to make money. And later rounds of investments will pay off will buy out and pay off some of the earlier investors. Does that not happen in venture capital?
You described it, but venture capital, there is no guarantee.
There is no guarantee, and they're not literally...
And they're not, literally defrauding people.
They're not literally taking the money out for, their fun stuff.
Yeah.
But then who pays for all those ping pong tables, Kurt?
And I buy a Rolls Royce with that money, or I pay for my mortgage, the VCs will not be pleased with me. The SEC will not be pleased with me. It would not be good.
Isn't that kind of what the Airbnb, not Airbnb, what was the offices?
WeWork?
The WeWork. Isn't that what the WeWork guy did?
Supposedly everything he did was unethical, but not illegal.
Isn't that what
I would phrase his actions as not yet illegal.
What about the Nissan guy? Didn't the Nissan guy...
Oh, Carl Skokie?
Yeah. Didn't he pay off, he has 3 houses that Nissan was paying for?
Okay, he didn't have any houses. Those were Nissan's houses. Those were investments for Nissan that he made. He just lived in them. And Nissan looked the other way because he was successful.
I'm kind of a side-eye guy at private capital, venture capital, private equity type stuff to begin with. So in my mind, Kenneth Courtright is a bad, shitty dude, but he's only 2 steps more shitty than a lot of other dudes.
Well, this is, by the end, it's just outright fraud.
It is outright fraud by the end.
The question is, when it started, was this a legitimate effort, or did it always...
Did he really think that he could, that he could buy a website, he could take someone's money, let's be honest, let's think about the steps here. I take your money for $100,000, I take $100,000 of your money. I buy a website for 25, 30 grand. Because those websites were trash. I looked at a bunch of them. All the ones I clicked on were just clickbait, terrible.
So you found these sites?
Oh yeah. And but don't worry, I'm going to quadruple the site's revenue. So now it makes $150,000 a year, in which case I get to keep 75, and then you're going to get half the revenue and, all that sort of stuff. I mean, where do you get this idea that you're just going to form this network of sites? I mean, at the very least, he had to think that black hat SEO was some magic thing he was going to pull off to make his crappy blog network AdSense affiliate links pay off.
You're right. Yes. Well, I mean, anyone who has experience with this would know, like, there's no guarantee. I mean, the idea that you could buy, that it would scale, that you could buy hundreds of sites and scale those, that's, like, I have a hard time believing that. I accept that someone inexperienced would know that this was a problem.
That's who
this wouldn't work.
That's who all these guys prey on. People that who are inexperienced.
I think the people who invested, I really don't blame them. The court rights, my question is, I don't see that they really could have thought that this would be plausible or sustainable. And certainly at the end, when the company is making quadruple payments on his mortgage, and he's
straight up pulling money out of this company. And
the company's paying for private school for their kids.
I mean, and the fact that
that tells you, like, okay, it's not, at this point it's not legit. I mean, but was it always that way?
But even in the beginning, there's no way that they took your $100,000 and then invested that $100,000. None of the assets they bought cost $100,000 or even $50,000, and then we had to put in $50,000 worth of conversion rate optimizations.
Right. Well, yeah. They don't have to put in all of it. And I know they told me the broker they used.
Did they put in 80% of it? I mean, they didn't. I think they had to take. They were taking way more than 50% of that money and putting it directly into their pockets. Allegedly, is what I think. Allegedly,
based on the SEC file. That's what the SEC alleges. So that's what we're basing this off of. I know they told me the website broker they use, and I'm familiar with them. It's a really well-known broker, especially in the Shopify space. That broker, I know it thinks is legitimate.
So the websites existed.
The websites existed, so people did get a real website. The staff, we knew one of the guys, and I talked to two of them. I think they were making a best effort.
Yeah.
We just don't know. Was this legitimate at the start, and then got strange?
I mean, I guess if it was a con job from the beginning,
like, why would you even hire staff?
you wouldn't build out that much staff. I mean, but here's to go back. I think the line between con artist and I'm a CEO and I get to pay myself a bunch of money and, like, the business will pay for a bunch of stuff for me in a legal fashion in America, that's a thin line.
Yeah.
There's a thin line of just like, oh, by the way, I'm a CEO, so I just get all this free shit and I get to keep half the money generated. Like, people just think that that's a thing that happens, and
it's not the case.
And it's not the case, but then when they get the opportunity to kind of make that thing happen, that's what they make happen.
Yeah, so there's a thin line between business expense and embezzlement. That's really what we're
So if it's like, I took your $100,000 and, by the way, $50,000 of that is now mine, is shady and a terrible way to run a business.
But that's still not illegal. Because I go, listen, that's my management fee.
Yeah.
That's to compensate my time and my strategy, and you're going to get that back because now I'm the one. It's entirely hands-off and passive for you, the investor. I'm taking care of everything. So I don't expect them to spend $100,000 on a website.
I don't.
If I invested $100,000,
I expect them to invest more than like 20 though, which is what I think they probably did.
Yeah. Based on what we saw.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think it was just like, it was all buzzword laden. They really liked, Google ads. I mean, it's the linchpin of the business is Google ads in like 2013. And then in 2015, it becomes Facebook ads, Facebook traffic. And then in 2018 and 2019, it becomes, Shopify, passive income. It's just all, whatever the current buzzword of the day is, that's what they use to entice people and being like, oh, well, this is what our new pivot is too. So don't worry, the money's going to come any second now. I mean, he even says this is great in his message again from when they switched everything. So if I'm hard to reach, please forgive me. And please pardon me as I and the team are working tirelessly around the clock to recapitalize your websites and this company to remedy all issues. If we are forced to go the bankruptcy route, it has been shared with us our plan to get approved, but site partners might see anything for years. So I have to do this to stave off bankruptcy. And if we go bankrupt, you won't see anything. So you better leave me alone.
Oh, yeah. That is what's going on there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was at the end, though. That's in 2017.
That's in 2017. This thing didn't go under until December 30th, 2019.
But I think in our timeline of legit business to con job, we have fully swung the needle all the way over to con job by that point.
Okay, I see. So what are our takeaways here?
Well, I think first of all, it's guaranteed returns are a scam.
That's the immediate.
Unless it's literally treasury bills and savings bonds.
So
like, if the treasury bills and savings bonds don't pay out, you should hoard gasoline and bullets. Like that's the first thing.
Just put all your money into canned food and shotguns.
That's my thing with gold, where they're like, well, I got to invest my money in gold because what if the dollar collapses? Like, bro, if the dollar collapses, you should be investing your money in seeds because that's what you will need.
Yeah, you're going to want AR-15s and tall fences. So number one is any investment opportunity. Investment vehicle, whatever it is, that has a guaranteed rate of return. All right, so that's our giant red flag. That immediately tells you that's a no-go. I think without that part, this otherwise would have looked like a legitimate business to most people from the outside in.
Yeah, if they didn't, well, I mean, obviously the guaranteed returns is what prompted people to invest with them. But if they didn't promise the guaranteed returns and they just literally took your money and then just ran that as long as they could, and at the end of the day, maybe it only would have lasted like 1 or 2 years, and at the end of the day, they were like, oh, by the way, it all failed. Sorry, company went bankrupt, and he just walks away with everyone's money. He probably would have got away with it.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would love to know what and maybe it's in the filing and we just don't see it. I would love to know what got the SEC investigating. It was probably just complaints.
Well, one of the complainants was, I found a YouTube video of this like woman who's like an attorney who's like really into investments. And she was like, holy shit. Like these videos only have like 500 views, but she read through the entire complaint and she was like, okay, well, here are the complainants. And it's like 4 names and 2 of them are like FBI dudes. But one of them is a banker at like, I don't remember the name of the bank in the southwest suburbs. So I think it was like literally his banker. So I wonder if the bank guy dropped a dime on him or what, or the bank guy had to cooperate with the feds once the feds rolled in.
So what they offered was supposedly a hands-free passive income and you're with no skills required and you invest in a website and online business. I think if that's what you want to do, the answer to doing that is invest in tech stocks, invest in companies, in like a traditional brokerage account.
Like
right?
I'm sure there's a, what's it called? What's like SPY and SPY-G and Moat.
Well, there's an ETF. There's an ETF, an exchange-traded fund.
Yeah, there's an exchange-traded fund. They're called ETFs, where it takes like a whole section of sort of the market and like it's one stock you buy. So there's one called SPY, which is just the S&P 500. That's where most of my money is in SPY. There's one called ITA that is defense and aerospace contractors. And after Trump won, I put a bunch of money in ITA. It's going very well. I invested.
The whole market's up.
I invested.
You can throw a dart away.
After the 2016 election, I invested in what I call the evil sector of the economy, and my stocks are doing great. So yeah, like look at the ETFs. They're really good. You're like kind of diversified. So it's like not just one stock, but you're also just not like a total wiener and buying the entire stock market.
Well, there's semiconductor ETFs would get you into technology like hardware. But there's also information services or IT ETFs. That's going to get you, that's probably closest to what you want. And that would I don't think there's a minimum.
Well, and here's
beyond what like the brokerage wants.
The joke of it is the S&P 500 over the past 40 years has paid out, I think, at more than 15% a year.
Hmm.
So you literally could have just, and it outperformed Bernie Madoff, I think. And I think it obviously outperformed the 15% these people were claiming. Like if you literally put all your money in SPY and just sat on it for 40 years, you'd have more money than doing these wild ass investments.
That's the dark truth of investing. Stop screwing around. Just everything goes to the S&P 500 and don't mess with it. You got to be in it for the long haul.
Anyway, I don't know how this turned into like mad money.
Well, we got to bring all the sound effects back for that.
So anyway, if something's too good to be true, it probably is. The most like repeated line of a million times.
Again, it's that. It's the guaranteed return. That's immediately like that's the red flag. Sorry, without that, if you take that away from it, then from the outside looking in, I could see where people thought this was legitimate and invested money. And I'm sorry that people lost. Over 500 people lost money to this thing, and I hope the SEC is able to do a clawback on it.
Well, if it was $100,000 a throw and they raised $75 million, I can't do the math in my head.
Well, some people would have invested more. The Sun-Times article just specifies, quote, more than 500 investors since January 2017.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I feel bad.
Also notes at least 75 million. So who knows how much money they got.
Yeah.
But yeah, you thought they were shady. Give me more. I want more color here. I want to know more about the lunch. I want to know how shady they were. What did they order?
What did they order? They were on the keto diet. That came up. They did get cocktails with their dishes.
And you were like, how do you run all this? And he was just like, it's fine. Don't worry about it.
They were like, well, we have a team. The team does it. Yeah. I mean, I didn't get into the actual logistics of it until I talked with a couple of their people some weeks later. But it wasn't obvious to me when I met them for lunch. It was not obvious to me that this was like people invested and they bought a website for you.
You just thought it was a company and they had a ton of money because they were rich or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought they were just my impression, and I don't know how accurate it was. My impression was this guy had experience in digital marketing, and he was going to buy and scale a whole bunch of stores and sell those stores, and this really was his own investment. And maybe he had a few angel investors or whatever. I did not realize the scale of the investments that were occurring here. And at that time, I mean, if you Googled him, you'd find tons of content and articles and interviews that would lead you to believe that this guy's legit and knows what he's talking about.
Well, and it just goes to show the whole thing of pretend like you belong. Like this guy was just like, I'm a big time businessman. I do a lot of investments. I definitely know what I'm talking about and how to run a business. And things are going great for me. And everyone believed him. Yeah,
they talked about they were well dressed, and they talked about, oh yeah, we live in this big property and that's like south of here.
Yeah.
And you mentioned a condo in Gold Coast and going to after parties at events. So I accepted that they were successful. And I accepted that they were legitimate and successful to that point, but I did not believe in what they were pitching then. But I didn't think it was outright fraud until later, where I thought, okay, well, there is a chance that this thing's a scam, and then I walked away from it. And then months later, I get a text from you. It goes, hey, isn't this these guys you had lunch with? The SEC says that they allege a $75 million Ponzi scheme. I was like, oh my God, it was a scam.
We got good noses.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, you came back from the lunch and you were like, those people were weird. And,
yes.
And you described the whole thing to me and I was like, this is not a right thing. It was too ramshackle.
Yes.
If you're running 400 Shopify stores, you are a true fucking business that's you have offices in an office park with with floors worth of people and different levels of people, and people have focused on specific sites that they're the head of, and all the
knowing we'll use Auto Anything example. Drew Sanaki was on the show and he talked about direct mail marketing, but he is the CEO of Auto Anything. That's one website, right? One website that's been around a while that sells a bunch of stuff. They employ dozens of people, and it's a big office.
Yeah.
Right? For one website.
Yeah.
You're going to run 400, 800 websites with 20 people, and they're all completely disparate?
I mean, if you told me that
Not happening.
If you told me they had 5,000 employees, I would be like, okay, maybe they could pull it off. That's just 10 employees a store. I mean, that's not crazy.
Yeah,
Plus whatever the HR was and all the other stuff to actually run the business. I mean, they'd need at least 5,000 employees. So the fact that they had 50.
Well, the other thing is, they initially I was asking them about strategy and what are you doing, and it got a little combative with Carrie. I was like, all right. And we moved away from that. And then the only piece of marketing advice that they gave me, because I was like, I said, you're doing this big thing. You should be giving me advice. This is like this huge thing you're doing. What? And he goes, oh, I'll tell you the thing we're really hot on right now. Micro-influencers. And that was it. That was the sole, maybe he wanted to play his cards close to his chest. I don't know. But the sole piece of marketing advice they gave me was, you got to use micro-influencers. They got to be 4,000 to 9,000. That's followers on Instagram. That's the sweet spot.
Oh, and that was the next pivot. That's the next pivot. Because, I mean, we see Instagram blowing up and how important Instagram is to various stores. The next pivot he would declare to people is, well, we're going in hard on Instagram now.
Could be.
Also, micro-influencers, they generate nothing for you, right? Because Julie's tried micro-influencers. Well,
so that was a point in his favor because it spoke to experience with influencers where, the 100,000 person influencer is the one who's probably not legitimate. The 8,000 person influencer, they probably have a legitimate following. So that was a point in his favor. It was just odd that that was the sole. It's like you're managing hundreds of stores and that's your only advice. But it could just been conversation.
I don't know. As Ether Cycle's resident skeptic, these people stunk to high heaven the moment you got back.
I did I got back and was like, you won't believe this. I was like, they got hundreds of Shopify stores. You're like, what? Yep.
It's like all selling different things. And they don't care about any of them.
Yeah, it wasn't like I had one store, like one supplier and one store, and I divided up niches, or they were for different countries or languages. Yeah, they're all, every one of them completely different.
Yeah, I remember seeing that spreadsheet. You sent me a link to that spreadsheet. It was a fucking disaster. It was terrifying.
Ugh.
Anyway, so that's that. Don't get scammed, please.
Yes, please.
No one will guarantee. Anyone who guarantees you returns is a scammer. Anyone who's pitching you something where you won't have to do any work and it's too good to be true is a scammer. Don't fall into those traps.
Yeah, that's the takeaway. Man, I'm drained just even thinking about it.
I love it.
Ugh.
I was telling everyone last 3 days. I was like, I had lunch with this dude. Even though I didn't. I stole your valor.
That's fine. I'll back you up. If someone's like, Paul said he had yep, that was him. Jeez. So.
That's it.
That's all I got. Yeah, please don't get scammed. Join us in the Facebook group. We'll do, the next episode, I think we'll do a Q&A. And I'll post in the Facebook group with a call for your questions. So let us know what you want to hear next time.
All right.
This is my very own episode of American Greed. CNBC.
CNBC.
American Greed.